Hey everyone, we're live. Welcome to AMA number 49, the 13th of December, 5 p.m. UTC. We've got Mary Camacho and Art Brock here today. Hi guys.
Hi, everybody.
All right, so the most questions we have ever had, more than 150 questions today. So it'll be a little rapid fire, just off the back of a successful dev camp, an elemental chat public test, which I'm sure many of you participated in, and an update to the roadmap. So Mary, firstly, like elemental chat, successes and learnings, we peaked with 5,000 users. Yeah, successes and learnings, and what intelligence did we receive?
Yeah, well, actually, we peaked with over 5,500 users, not just 5,000, and up to 1,100 were simultaneously chatting at different points. So it was pretty large test, which was lovely. It was exactly what we were looking to do. We had we had some starts that were a little bit slow at the very beginning of it, where we restarted once or twice on the test to make sure that we had everything set up correctly. And then really the test, while a lot of people may have thought we were testing Elemental Chat, the application, it really wasn't the app at all. It was a test of infrastructure. We were testing Holochain, and we were really testing the Holo infrastructure end to end. And that was really what we were looking for and what we learned the most about. So we got a lot of information about the stability of the Holo network. And then also, I think we've mentioned it a few times, but it was a test without sharding. So this was all full sync. So we did expect to get to a point where we would not, where we would need to basically end the test because things were going to start to slow down. Everybody was holding everything. All of the nodes on Holo were holding all of the data. And so I think Art will talk a little bit more about the Holochain learnings. But overall, it was great. And one of the things I just want to say about Elemental Chat in particular was that we keep talking about it like this prototype app. It's not ready for production or anything like that. And sometimes it kind of pains us to put out an application that's not designed as well as we would want an app to be designed. But there were some really great aspects of having it be a poorly designed app from a test perspective. It actually had us learn more about our system because of it. It had limitations. It's not the way we would want people who are writing really great chat apps in Holochain to design their apps. And so those limitations had us find things at different layers of the network, and especially in Holochain. So Art, why don't you talk a little bit about Holochain?
Sure. I also just want to clarify a little bit when you say, it's not an ideal app. Like the Elemental Chat app is not like something we're trying to put out in the world as a product, and so we kind of have neglected it a little bit and we haven't optimized it. So for example, when you load it, it basically does 1,000 queries right out of the bat, at least that version of it, right? Because it tries to load the first 20 messages in 40 channels and and other things. So basically, like every time you load or hit refresh, it hammers Holochain with 1,000 queries, which is not really how you'd want to design an app. But again, as Mary said, it was useful for testing to have that sort of level of inefficiency built into the app. And I just want to mention also that one of the challenges that was happening in the background in our infrastructure testing actually had to do with our logging app that we had forgotten to turn off and was definitely not meant to be running unsharded while trying to log all of the read activity, all of the interactions uh, with the elemental chat. So that was one of the things that actually it was also, I think, useful that it was turned on for a while. We eventually turned it off because as you get more and more users, again, since Holochain was not in a sharded mode, it was just becoming a heavier and heavier load for the logging app, which should be sharded. And by the way, sharding has been implemented on Holochain now for months. It just isn't the default setting, and so we on the Holochain team have been really kind of building lots of rigorous testing and more testing frameworks for sharding. And interestingly, we're not finding many bugs. The live tests actually were more helpful in finding some of these bugs than the testing frameworks, because there were still a few things. And one of the things in particular that we're addressing right now is really the long-term sharding. We didn't really have a good enough compression for, as we had, 20 something thousand messages, no, 150,000 messages. I don't even remember what the numbers were now. But as over time, as the load got larger and larger and people were doing historical gossip, we definitely needed better compression of the history. And that's one of the things that came out of the testing, which we should have known. We just didn't have it implemented fully. And anyway, so anything else you want me to say about any of that, Mayor?
No, just a real quick say on the numbers. It was about 33,000 chat messages, but
Okay.
the 150,000 that you're remembering was the chain entries. So
right,
it ended up being a lot of entries and a lot of gossip.
Right, and that's another one of the things that we actually optimized from this, in terms of disk space use. The links were taking up more space than they should have, and we have made some optimizations to that since then. And I mean, it's all good learning for really tuning Holochain, but Holochain wasn't supposed to work unsharded on these scales, and the fact that it was is a really great indicator of also how efficient it'll be with sharding turned on.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks so much, Art. And I think the guys probably shared the link, but there's a fantastic Elemental Chat public test successes and learnings blog post that was published on the 24th of November. So if any of you are watching and want to drop into that, I think that explains stuff. Mary wrote that explains stuff incredibly well. Okay, perfect. So next one, doesn't it attract investors to constantly share the current follow-up of the beta chart map? Why don't you share?
Yeah. Well, we just updated it after the elemental chat test. If you take a look at it now, I think we're going to put it up here on the screen today. And I'm not sure if we pushed it out on social media, but oftentimes we do after a couple of releases. So what we did is we moved that little in progress window along. It still looks like it's showing elemental chat in there, but if you look down at the timeline, the little dot for elemental chat is on the left-hand side of there now. And so what it looks like is that we're in a HoloFuel pre-release, which is actually what we've been doing this week. And so that one we're just now getting to. We haven't updated the roadmap with that for this week, but we've got about 50 people that right now are doing a pre-release test on HoloFuel. So this is not an internal test. This is now a community test. And we're getting a lot of great feedback. User experience feedback especially is what we're looking for on that test. And we're moving along and doing next week basically an internal test of the following milestone, which is about registration usability. And what that one really is a reworking of how holoports get registered on the network. It includes a lot of updates that we have been building in to the infrastructure, and that will be going out in January. Is what we're expecting that to do. It should really simplify the registration for the folks who are going to be registering holoports. So things are definitely moving along through these releases now, and it's pretty exciting. So yes, let's share. Let's keep sharing.
Cool. And then what's the update on HoloFuel as regard to hosts? Is test fuel in progress now?
Right. Well, this test isn't about holo hosts specifically. This is a web test of HoloFuel. The last time we did testing, the only people who had access, the only people who could test it were people who were hosts who had holoports because it was running on holoports. This is a web-only test, so we're having anybody who wants to use it hosted on Holo and who is part of our pre-release community of testers. Those are the folks that were invited to do some work with us on this round so that we can do a lot of usability testing and have folks observe how people are using the app. the feedback so far is really great. We're being told it's super clean, easy to use, and I'm sure we're getting some good suggestions for a couple of modifications as well.
Amazing. Art, there's another question about sharding and when it will be done. I guess you talked a little bit about sharding, but is there any more color you want to add there?
Well, even with the current iteration of tests that are being put on the Holo hosting network, it's our plan to switch sharding on that network. Like Holo has upgraded to a more recent version of Holochain that has a lot of these kinds of fixes in it for sharding, some of the lessons learned, the gossip optimizations, things like that. And so we're actually going to turn sharding on in the hosting network. But again, sharding has actually been built into Holochain. You just have to turn that on. It hasn't been on by default in your config file. So when will it be done? Done is a tricky thing here. It will be functional. I mean, it is functional already. We will continue to make improvements on it as we find things. It's, in many ways, it is the key to Holochain scalability. So there's a lot of complexity involved in it, making sure that the right parts of the network are getting the right operations, so everything is where you expect to find it when you need to find things. And yeah, it's working in that regard. That was some of the stuff that our tests were all about, was making sure all the data was going to the right places, and it was, and it's quite fast. So
cool. Okay, cool. Okay, and then bridging onto this one, is there going to be an elemental chat test with sharding on? And slightly like,
Yep.
how is the team meeting the goals in the roadmap? Thanks for all the good work.
Great, thank you guys. So we're definitely going to be doing some more testing of elemental chat with sharding. I mean, one of the great things about the previous test doing it with full sync is that we now have a baseline. And so when we go to test it with sharding, we're going to be able to do some comparisons to see what's possible with it. So that's very exciting. I don't have an exact time frame around what that's going to be. We were doing some planning for it and decided that it wasn't going to happen in December, but we were going to wait until folks are back from the holidays. So that's on its way. It's not in the roadmap. It's just another release. There's probably going to be a lot of other smaller releases that are not things that are sitting on the roadmap, and we'll just be announcing those and talking about those throughout, the future as we move into January. So.
Cool. Okay. And then each milestone requires several months to achieve. I'm just unpacking this question. When beta? Okay. When beta?
Well, the thing is not all milestones are equal, and some of them take a lot less to achieve than others. And so we are moving through some of them faster, and we're not going to predict when beta right now. We're going to keep producing one milestone, one release after another until we get it all done, and then we'll be ready. And I think there's actually another question. I'm just going to kickstart one and two that's going to be down lower, what was asking about doing security reviews, and I'll just bring that in now. Part of what this is that we need to keep producing all of these releases, getting them working, show all of it working together, and then there's a security review period for this as well, and that's really important. We're getting security reviews done on several aspects of the Holochain, as well as Holo, as well as some of the apps, and I think the question asked it in specific relationship to smart contracts, but we've got things that are not just smart contracts that also are going through security reviews, and I think that's important to remind folks.
Cool. Yep. All right. Next one. My HoloPort was never used in any testing so far. Does that mean transactional traffic will be scarce for my location?
Well, for one thing, there's a bunch of folks that are signed up into the HoloPort Alpha program where their port, it might be assigned to a specific developer and it might not be being used in a public test or a large test. That doesn't mean it's not necessarily being used. We have to assign all of the HoloPorts in the program for various uses, whether it's internal testing with 5 or 6 people, and you may not notice whether or not it's being used at any given moment. So that's the first thing is it doesn't necessarily say anything about transactional traffic for your location, because we don't have apps in all of the locations at this point in time. So there's no way even to predict that yet.
Yep. Okay, cool. And will those people, sorry, Art, you're going to jump in.
I'm just going to jump on the tail of that too.
Yep.
That we also have some apps that have been built that are anxious to be tested on. I mean, from the community, they're anxious to be tested on the Holo hosting network, and we're allocating small blocks of holoports for Junto, Kazuna, Hum, those kinds of folks also for testing. So you may not be in a public test, but it doesn't mean that there's no testing going on.
Yeah, I'm hosting chess at the moment. All right. Will those people with holoports arriving in January get to sign up for the alpha testing and rewards program?
Well, we're getting really close. We have about 780, 790 folks in the Holoport Alpha program. We opened it up to get to 800 because that was what we needed at the time. So it's not going to stay open beyond the 800 right away. But when we get to a later phase of Alpha, when we need to really do some larger testing, we'll likely open that back up again towards the end of our Alpha test period. So yes and no.
Gosh, I tell you what, I'm just going to pause for a second. The rapid fires. When you get the sort of the breadth of this many questions across just a few contexts, you realize how much we're doing. Anyway, and the roadmap. It's pretty cool. Okay, is there any truth to the commonly known equation 1 hot equals 1 HOF?
Yeah, I mean, for the initial 6-month period, at least, I mean, what we said in our green paper and our currency white paper was there's going to be an initial period where we will redeem 1 hot for 1 holofuel. Beyond that period, we don't know, because part of what's going to happen is that sites will, like exchanges and such, will probably start carrying holofuel, and prices might start to diverge, and we can't control that. If hot and holofuel are both listed on exchanges, we can't control that price. We will have some influence over that price, and that's connects to the next questions on here. So I'm gonna let you ask.
Cool. Yep, exactly. So what will the max supply of hot, and will it inflate or deflate?
The supply of hot is static. It can only go down as things get burned or lost or things like that. It can't increase. But the supply of hot is static. Maybe they were asking about holofuel, which has a different type of static supply in that it's always a net zero supply. It's a mutual credit. So the positive and negative balances are always equal. So in that sense, a net zero supply is also static, but the active supply can expand and contract without needing to burn.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, I am that one. I mean, I think we've answered in like 15 different AMAs at all sorts of lengths and all sorts of places there. So I think we're going to assume that the person asking that one can get further information online, and if there's any good resources, the guys will add it in the chat. There's a pretty interesting one. So if holofuel is a stable coin and currencies with backed asset, what's the real backed asset? Gold, food, etc. I haven't had this one for a little while. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So in the white paper, but when I wrote the currency white paper, there were not a bunch of stable coins out there, by the way. There was Tether existed, but was having banking problems, and it wasn't fully stable. Anyway, there weren't a lot of stable coins out there. So I did not, when I was talking about making holofuel stable, I did not expect people to interpret that as pegged to a national currency, which it is not. And most stable coins are pegged. And that's what I mean, but that's what I mean by static. It's actually like pegged to a particular unit. Holofuel is stable as in non-volatile, right? It's designed to actually converge to the cost of delivering hosting. And so that's tied to the delivery of a real market good. And although it may get used for many different things, different holofuel apps may bridge to it, or different apps may bridge to holofuel, and it might end up being a whole kind of holofuel economy. Fundamentally, it's always redeemable for hosting power through Holo and the hosting network. Therefore, what it's backed by is hosting power. And similarly, like the Internet of Energy currency is backed by kilowatts, or different currencies that we're trying to build are often backed by the ability to deliver and produce a particular value unit.
Awesome. Thank you, Art. Okay, Mary, like going from a slightly more philosophical to not, when hot listing on Coinbase, Huobi, or KuCoin?
Well, I'm going to answer it first to say that we're working with exchanges in the US right now. We're talking to them. We're still talking to them. These processes take time. And we will let people know as soon as we have information about it. What we can say for sure is that we expect absolutely to be there by the time we go to beta, but we're working with them to try to get it on the US exchanges prior to beta. I don't have anything to say about other exchanges. We're on exchanges all around the world, and we continue to be added to some, and we sometimes are removing ourselves from others that we don't think are high enough quality. So this is just an ongoing process for us, but I don't have dates, but yes, know that we're working towards what people are asking for.
Yeah, is it worth just mentioning very briefly to people, because we have Holo Fuel and Hot, that we take a lot of time and care with these conversations?
Right. Well, they're absolutely two different things. And it's not just working with the exchanges, but it's also working with attorneys and advisors in the US to make sure that we are setting both of these things up to effectively operate correctly in the various jurisdictions.
Yep. Awesome. Super. Thanks, Mary. Okay. And so US residents who are unable to participate in the 2018 initial community offering of Hot were allowed to pre-purchase HoloFuel. When will they realistically be able to access or create any form of liquidity with these holdings? And will they need to become hosts in order to use it?
Right. So absolutely not. They don't need to become a host in order to use HoloFuel. The HoloFuel that they pre-purchase will be delivered after beta. And as Art was talking about earlier around the conversation about the one-to-one and when that changes, the reason that will change is because of various things will be happening outside of our control, like HoloFuel becoming available on exchanges. And when that happens, that's when the market really opens up for people to be able to move HoloFuel. So that's the liquidity I'm sure that's being asked about.
Okay, super.
I also just want to throw a disclaimer in there with this question in case this ever gets used for evidence with the SEC or anything, but the only US residents who were able to participate were people who had already participated in the Indiegogo campaign and bought hosting devices or do something like that. We were not doing a general. There was not an opportunity generally for.
No, this was a customer.
So if you feel like you missed out, it may have been because you were not already a customer.
Okay. I had read a long time ago that HoloFuel can be used as a currency by other apps. Is this possible? And could we use HoloFuel to buy groceries in the future?
Well, certainly I would expect that other apps may use HoloFuel, and they may use HoloFuel actually a few different ways, not even as a currency, but because we do some minimal KYC and then more KYC for other levels. So there are apps that might even just use, like you have to sign something with the HoloFuel key or something, just even as a civil defense to keep people from creating spam accounts or something like that, because they don't want to do their own KYC. But we do expect it to be easy to interface and interact with HoloFuel on the network. And so, I would expect a bunch of apps to want to do things like, I don't know, like imagine a blogging app like medium.com type of thing saying, pay your membership fees in HoloFuel or whatever, just because it would be an easy thing to integrate without a lot of additional building. Now, does that mean you can buy your groceries like from a retail store locally near you? There's a lot of sort of steps to getting something bridged all the way to that kind of usage, but it certainly could be used for many different things. I'm not sure how long it'll take for groceries to be on that list, though.
Cool. Okay. Well, when will regular users be able to use their computers as holoports? So there's a lot of computing power out waiting for us. And the question is really wants to serve the project and wants to use computing power for the project, wants to earn HoloFuel, being a hot holder for a couple of years and wants to participate by using computer power for apps from signed off Holo fan.
Yeah, so I just want to note, when we're building a pure hosting network, it can be really tricky to manage the compatibility of the configurations across all the hosts, right? They actually have to stay in sync. And if we make changes to protocols or updates to things, we have to keep all that stuff in sync, because you have to essentially have it not matter which host you got, and the hosts need to coordinate and orchestrate rather seamlessly. And that can be really tricky to do when you have that many different sets of hardware, many different operating systems, different networks and network configurations that they're sitting behind. And then it gets even trickier if you start having that also be a computer that's being used for other things, or like a laptop where people are closing it and it goes offline. So we've really focused the hosting network in terms of starting with dedicated computers and the ones that were purchased through us, and that way we have one set of reliable configurations. After beta, we'll enable more DIY hosting, and in particular, I think we're still going to keep it focused on, you have to be running the HPOS, the HoloPort operating system, essentially, um, and ideally on an empty device. But at some point, it would certainly be possible to also run that as a virtual machine on a device that you're doing other computing on. But in the end, laptops are never going to be optimal host boxes, right? Things that you close and take offline, you know, um, aren't good for providing hosting, because we want higher reliability than that. But hopefully that answers the question. There is a path to being able to tap into more day-to-day hosting, and yeah, I'll stop there.
Cool. Thank you so much, Art. Okay, so on to some questions about new projects. So what recent development or news in the crypto world are you personally excited about, and why? Might be related to Holo or not. So I'll jump in, and then guys, if there's anything you want to add, let me know. So I think firstly, I'm excited by the big shift this year away from DeFi, then looking up, like, the push into layer one and layer twos, and then the massive shift into Web3, NFTs, etc. Not so much because I'm super excited about NFTs themselves. I think Eric's written some great stuff about them, and there's been some good commentary in the Holochain ecosystem. But I'm excited that creators and creative people are starting to play with the blockchain to do things, because that brings me to my sort of next development. Is I just think the amount of energy, focus, and attention on digital assets rather than ledgers has brought the blockchain to life for a whole wave of people. And the exciting development is all of that that focused energy is really looking for places to go where you can do real things. And I think, like, personally, that's this explosion of focus and creativity is going to lead to a demand for exactly the kind of tooling that we've been building. Right. All right, can you comment on these two, please? Or like, I guess building on this, Holochain and Web3, and Holochain and Metaverse.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least I have always viewed Holochain and Holo, especially with Holo hosting, as kind of the next iteration of Web3. And, there's a lot of talk in the blockchain space about Web3, and yet there's a lot of roadblocks as well in terms of scalability and cost of use, and that type of thing. And I feel like we've managed to actually break through most of those barriers, and therefore hopefully can deliver on kind of the promise of Web3, the aspirations that are out there. And I really think that that's an important and emerging conversation. And for sure, that's one of the things that's also exciting about what's emerging, is that there is more and more uh, looking to, what is Web3? How might we use it? Should I be looking at that? Should I be taking it seriously? Am I, and I think businesses and larger businesses are having to ask those questions, and we hope to provide them with a viable path. Um, as far as the metaverse goes, and I have to say, I'm a little pained by Facebook's rebranding, trying to claim the word meta. And, but yeah, one of the fun things about Holochain is the ability to have your data, like when you're running Holochain, your data locally, and having rich data locally, and then having only sort of the interaction type stuff go. I can imagine being able to power a lot of virtual worlds and virtual data and virtual experiences. I suspect we're going to see some experiments. We're already starting to see some groups wanting to experiment in those spaces, but it might be a while before we see, something you would really dive deep into.
Yep. Okay. Next one. Nitro League claims to have partnership with Holo. Is this true? If so, what is the nature of the partnership? So that one's been popping up on Telegram. So I think some of you might have remembered a ton of old ecosystem sessions where we were playing around with Space Invaders and other games. We're experimenting with the movement of information from one game into the other. For example, like if I'm really good at Space Invaders, what might that mean if I'm playing Tetris? And we've been playing with it with elemental chess as well and elo scores and other things. So part of building out this ecosystem is growing the capacity within the holochain community. The other is opening up the blockchain space and drawing what you can't do in blockchain towards holochain. So Nitro is me playing around with the idea of play to earn games, which people are pretty excited about in the blockchain space right now, and thinking, well, what if we can start to embed some of the thinking principles and technology in the holochain ecosystem into this space, and what that might we be drawing into the holochain ecosystem as a result? So I think there'll be a bit more to share and play around with that in January. All right, and that goes on to, in what way can holochain improve the gaming industry? So I'm going to take that as computer games, if that's okay. Which I hope is the intention of the question. And I think, like, again, pointing back to some of the conversations for this, the person who asked this, there's some phenomenal threads on the Holochain forum around from one of the chess.com developers looking at Holochain, and coming from his perspective, there are a few different things. One is Holochain and Holo are an amazing way of managing peak demand. The second is you can actually play the chess game on this distributed application framework, not just kind of agree that the results of a score or my elo rating or whatever, get like Algorand are doing with the chess economy, are working in this, just capturing again the outcome of the game. You're actually playing the game, and so that starts to open up this idea of like who's providing the infrastructure. And then when you start looking at like some of the things Eric Harris Braun is working on with where and how and you start to see really see composability come to life. So just following that thread for turn-based games, I can see a huge explosion in creativity around the game, the rules of the game, how you play the game, etc. And then I think just like this thread of over the last sort of 6 to 9 months of people coming to this space, a huge acceleration of people coming into blockchain, getting really excited, wanting to do things, and using the sort of the early stage tools, then wanting to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think Holochain starts to open up huge amount of possibility for the interplay between game players, the game themselves, and the infrastructure games hosted on. And then especially when we start to really unlock currencies, because games are filled with tons and tons of different currencies. And at the moment, they're sort of being tokenized with a fixed supply token and maybe a variable supply token, or like a rebasing currency if you're lucky. But suddenly with Holochain, all sorts of reputation systems start to get unlocked, statuses and other things that we kind of just a natively part of Holochain applications that we don't get too super excited about, a huge value unlocks in the blockchain game ecosystem. So really very excited in that area as well. And I also think like the coordination stuff is easier to experience when you're doing something like playing a game, and participating and engaging with other people. So I think there's going to be some cool advances there in communication and coordination. Okay, what are some most exciting projects building on Holochain right now? So I think I was going to jump in with some of those, but Art, do you want to come in quickly first while I just catch my breath, and then I'll
Sure.
jump in and add in.
So some of the ones I'm excited about are the platform we're calling How at the moment, which is it's like a governance platform for Holochain's emergent standards. This is part of Eric's where, what, when, how type stuff. When for scheduling, where for locating different things in a shared map space. And anyway, how is us actually trying to set ourselves up to open up participation on the Holochain emerging standards using Holochain itself, a Holochain app, and have it be a very participatory governance framework. And it's just kind of it's fun to see it and see that emerging. Also, Rival, the namespace app, which could end up being a really good way for other apps to sort of delegate the management of Rival data, delegate the management of consensus to Rival data to this Rival app, basically treating things as namespaces that need to have Rival data, and then they don't have to internalize any of that complexity of consensus into their own app. Also could help them generate revenue without needing, and civil defense and a whole bunch of different things. I think that's going to kind of spark the ecosystem. Also, maybe you wanted to talk about Nico and Adam perspective.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah, so Nicholas Luck in Germany has been working on this framework perspective, which is about, basically it's trying to be chain agnostic, can function with different blockchains or just decentralized systems, including Holochain in the background, and has an Atom framework for basically coding your apps to work and interface with these different things. Right now, I think it interfaces with IPFS and Ethereum and Holochain. But there are different groups that are already, like the Junto group has been using Atom for building their framework and intending to be sort of cross-chain compatible and that kind of stuff. So that's a fun thing for Holochain to be playing with other Holochain apps to be able to play with other chain ecosystems.
Well, yeah, I agree. Like I find the stuff that Eric and the Lightning Rod Labs, various people, really, really exciting. I mean, because I think like it opens up like the studying of grammars and patterns in other spaces and how patterns emerge, and then have Eric be working on maybe how to represent these patterns, to me is it's a really inspiring way of developing. And having these kind of like solutions emerge as patterns it's just something that I'm not used to. And so there's just this magical unfolding of like kind of a new experience. And I remember being on AMA and highlighting like the visceral experience I had when I first connected my HoloPort. And it was a bit like that when I first played with Where. It was like for the first time, suddenly I am placed in this spatial environment on this application, and the link is between me and my device and Eric and his device, and it just felt like it felt so strong, even much more so actually than chat to me, that I was like kind of part of the application that had been built. And it was just that moment, and it continues to come back to me. I don't know if that means anything for anyone else or what that might mean for the future, but it's remarkable to me to connect with technology in that way, because it's not a normal experience. And I do know that, for example, with Where, there's a few things going on that can potentially be connecting it to thousands and then tens of thousands and hopefully millions of users based on relationships we've been building over the last few years. So let's see how that will unfold. And some of those other projects. Yeah, Nico is one that's come to mind. Also, the Internet of Energy group and what could be happening with the smart grids, how they're thinking about currencies, and also how they're thinking about interfacing blockchain and holochain, I think is pretty cool. There's a lot of very exciting bridges between the blockchain and the holochain world, which we'll hear a lot more about next year. I'm super excited about Endless. That's a sort of a riff making application that's moving, that we've been talking back and forth for a while about how their protocol for creativity might be working on Holochain, and they kind of spun up a prototype app really quickly. Just gets super exciting. And then I just think there's a maturing suddenly around how might all of these things be connected, and how might suddenly a real mass of activity, use, volume and attention sort of move towards our ecosystem. And I can see not beginnings is kind of like a weird way of describing it, but I can see doors opening that weren't previously. And also, like, there's a lot of conversation as well going around people that still are skeptical over the digital asset space as they see it right now, but are now fully bought into digital assets longer term and see Holochain as the bridge to real productive value, real economic value in the digital asset space as well. So I'm pretty excited about the non-technical conversations that are happening to enable that.
Yeah, just really briefly, I also want to mention from Lightning Rod Labs. I mean, a bunch of people know about Acorn as a project management tool, but that's actually a pretty cool thing. And then there's a real-time collaborative editor that has also been built, sort of a HackMD-like kind of editor, or Google Doc-like editor that's using SYN in the background as the coordination protocol. And then, Eric's company, Last Speed Software, had already had a product, Snapmail, for like the last 30 years or something, and he's ported that over. He's now serving his old customers on Snapmail with Holochain based Snapmail now. Like, he's actually got his first customers trying that out, sort of testing it, and that's for people who want to have like in-company mail without a mail server. It's peer-to-peer mail without a mail server to maintain, and that kind of thing. And that also means it's spam free, because it's actually, if you want to create a place that is just for the peers on this network, anyway, there's just a lot of buzz about NFTs. Harlan and Adam are waking up their Trust Graph, Core Nexus, Holomart stuff. Anyway, a lot of fun things happening.
Yep. And what creative and innovative features of Holo do you believe will be a big trigger to make the Holo market value surpass that of coins and others? What role can the community play to ensure Holo achieves target levels? Do you want me to jump on that one, or do you want to go for that? Or both?
Yeah, we can just both. Do you want to jump in? Well, one of the things that I think would be fun in terms of what role the community could play is when you look at the if you want to have if what you want to do is target Holo's market cap rising, like if that's actually what you're trying to say, is you want to have a big trigger to have the market value surpass the other coins, which is what the question is asking. There's a bunch of projects that are above us in market cap that it's actually fairly easy to build what those things do on Holochain. So like, as people build sort of the Oracle solutions that like Chainlink has, which are already pretty much solved in Holochain natively, or things like that, as people actually call these things out, and you start seeing that, wait, Holochain actually solves all these problems that all of these other coins also do, and you build apps that actually demonstrate that, it seems tricky for those to continue to be ranked higher than the Holo hosting network.
Yeah, great. And I think like that, I think there's the way I often look at it, and when people sort of ask me this and we talk about what the possibility is, there's just, again, there's so much productive value, I guess, that can be brought online. And even the idea of this decentralized hosting network suddenly creates an entire economy around a new form of cloud. And so that's value, I guess, that either doesn't exist today or is certainly not held really well in the blockchain space, albeit there are a few like cloud alternates generally using generally in a way AWS resellers. So I think there's just that. I mean, that's just the start, isn't it? We think about Ion and what can happen in the energy space, and so really with people like starting to think, well, what are the big triggers? Isn't it really amazing for everyone listening here to hear about the exciting projects building on Holochain? And we haven't mentioned a decentralized exchange. We haven't mentioned oracles until Art just did. We haven't mentioned centralized exchanges. We haven't mentioned, the DeFi products. We haven't mentioned an NFT marketplace. Like, so when you look at the other ecosystems, you really see as the same thing in different flavors. And what you're hearing here is we're excited about a whole new form of collaboration, whole new ways of creating technology and whole new ways of value being created. So I just think that like the entire ecosystem has the capacity for creativity and innovation in a way that we're not seeing right now. No, it's not what we're seeing, in a way that's parallel to what we're seeing right now. Sorry, Mary, you want to jump in?
Yeah, because I think one of the things I like about the question is what are the creative and innovative features of Holo that you believe will, be a trigger for something? And, you know, it's less than obvious that, except when you're testing Holo Fuel, that one of the things that it does is it puts agency in each person who's on a side of a transaction, right? So there's the offer and then there's a receipt, and you have to agree to receive a transaction in Holochain. And I think that's pretty amazing as a feature, because I think when you look at like marketplaces where you have two sides of it and you're having people contract with one another across a space, right now all of that's going through third parties. And I think what Holochain does is this first time real peer-to-peer transactional marketplace opportunity. And look at how many marketplaces out there where people would rather not be going through it. I know for one, when you're hiring people around the world, and there's various marketplaces for that. As they start to get more and more centralized and the rules start coming in on them, and they start making it more and more difficult for people on either side of that contract, it gets kind of messy. So I'm really I'm really excited about the things that we may not have somebody right here ready to build just yet, but that I think will come over time as the software begins to be tested and explored by more and more people. And so those are some of the features that I'm excited about.
Amazing. Thanks, Mary. Okay, are you aware of any developers or teams using Holochain to build any metaverse style content, like an NFT marketplace or something similar to Decentraland or Sandbox and the like? And I think like the thing is, I think we sort of touched on this. There's some movement in the ecosystem towards there's some of the stuff I shared about the play to earn gaming before. And I think that the signs are pointing to a whole series of creative things being able to be done in virtual spaces with Holochain and with Holo. So I think probably leave that one there. Okay, the next one. The vast majority of crypto projects are built solely for the sole purpose of accumulating wealth for themselves. So what values do you intend to add to the crypto industry that will bring more abundance to the industry? Okay, a few things like, yeah, I don't know. Firstly, I think I don't fully, I struggle partly with the question, because on one hand, yep, there's a lot of cases of the kind of behavior that's outlined in the question. But the other side of things, I think like in many ways, the crypto industry is incredibly generous, and the relationships that form and the movement and transfers, especially when you think of like how crypto works compared to more traditional environments. I think there's a lot of amazing things going on there. So firstly, I just like ask for a little bit of generosity into the overall ecosystem we're in. And secondly, I think like just some of the things we've talked about with what can happen with mutual credit currencies, the capacity to move beyond money or tokenization. A lot of the thinking in the meta currency project, some of the work at Coventina Foundation, also that maybe Art can touch on here. But I would say that the main thing for me that gets really, really exciting is, one, by continuing to shift away from the perspective of consensus that you get in the majority of layer ones and layer twos, the cost of creativity goes down dramatically in Holochain. And so what can happen, what can be created, especially in moving beyond monetary systems, becomes really, really exciting. And then secondly, it becomes an amazing way of, well, at least how I perceive a large number of Holochain projects evolving, we start to understand like how to create things that are quite intangible now. I mean, for example, even we're thinking about joy or gratitude or some of these concepts, get a lot of people in the Holochain ecosystem thinking about how do I build a particular application, and as my network grows and scales and different users contribute different things, we start to see some more intangible characteristics being able to be understood. And I just think that it's just really, really exciting, albeit I don't usually let myself go there because there's a lot of work to go before. Yep, Art.
Yeah, I just want to chime in on this one too, and like you said, I'll question a little bit the assumption. I mean, I think there's certainly been scam projects and scam ICOs, and there's a bunch of projects that are in it for financial self-interest, and yet there's also a lot that are actually trying to build new infrastructure, new kinds of tools, and and I especially think a lot of the projects that I think identify more as in the DWeb space, the decentralized web space, whether that's IPFS or scuttlebutt, or there's a lot of projects that were never about the money here. This is about enabling new capacities, and really that's where we identify as well. Now, we also created a hosting project that has a currency, but remember, Holochain doesn't have a currency. We're kind of straddling both worlds a little bit and really trying to bring in these new um, capacities, because and you know if you read my stuff, I harp on this one point of having an unenclosable carrier for social DNAs, basically a way that we can take our shared agreements and encode them in a system that nobody else can shut down, and that as long as two or more people want to play with each other, nobody can really stop them. And I think that ends up being a pretty powerful pattern.
Awesome. All right. Art, another one, just about, I guess, origin stories. Whose name was the idea Holo? What does it mean to you? And is there a story behind the name Holochain, and why was the name chosen?
Yeah, really quickly, we actually had a branding meeting session kind of thing in this near the end of our internship program in San Francisco in the summer of 2017, and we were voting on different names and considering different names. And the draw to Holo in Holochain had to do with the holographic nature of Holochain, the way that when you take a regular photograph and you cut it in half, you get two halves of a picture. When you take a holograph or a hologram and you cut it in half, you get two whole pictures from a slightly different angle. And basically, it was that the whole sort of holographic structure of storage and memory in Holochain, such that even if you were to get a network partition, the system can keep running. It's still resilient. You still have a whole that you can interface with. And when that partition is healed, those two halves can still come back together into a unified whole, which you can't really do with blockchain and most other decentralized systems. And so it was that wholeness that we were going for with and the holographic patterning. And then a later web search pointed out that name had been suggested to us earlier, and we hadn't really noticed when Anders Amott, from one of my early articles about simple scalable cryptocurrencies, and I was like, what should we call this kind of thing? And he threw a few names out there, one of which was Holochain. And so that wasn't actually why we chose it in the time we were choosing it, but then it was funny to have found out somebody had already recommended it to us like a year earlier.
Awesome. Thanks, Art. All right. From the Turkish community here, you're saying think outside the blocks of what you're promising us, but do the big companies agree with you, or is it better for them to stay in the blocks?
You got for me to answer, huh?
Do you know what? Yeah, maybe Mary or I can pick this
So
one up.
I'll take a stab at it. I'm not sure that I have a great answer on this, but I mean, you can take this saying in a lot of different ways, is what I would say. Think outside the blocks is just thinking outside the box, right? We were just playing with it in one way, but also with blockchain, we're doing a form of basic integrity, data integrity, that is not a blockchain. So it was just it was a fun way of talking about it. What do we want big companies to agree with us? Well, You know, a lot of innovation happens in startups. It happens in the small companies that then become big companies because they've come up with something so innovative that others weren't ready for it. They couldn't see it coming. They didn't know how it was going to play. And that's how startup works. And so that's the game we're in. And for right now, we're really happy with the position that we're in about it. So yeah, I think we'll see where the future takes us. I'm sure it'll change.
Yeah, and there's a ton of validations from the EU in various writings uh, and and I think other groups. And I think what's also really interesting slash heartening in many ways is there's quite a lot of commentary out there, both in the institutional government level and also like social coordination level around solutions like Holochain. People getting really excited describing bits of our architecture. So I guess we've got a bit of working on a bit of assumption that there's some good fit out there for people, especially as things get proven out. And now in this phase of people start building cool stuff that other people talk to each other about, we're a lot more in that phase now. So it's quite exciting. And Mary, final one, especially I think directed at you here, your team working really hard. I wonder if you have regular fun activities incorporated into your busy schedules, like yoga, Pilates, games, meditation to help relax yourselves.
I love this question. I don't have any yoga and Pilates scheduled. I used to. It would be a good idea, but I think but really for the team, the team plays games together. Not all of the groups, but especially the Holo team, the Holo Dev team. They get together pretty regularly and play games. I don't know, Arthur, have you played the game with them? Yeah, okay. I've been invited and it's never worked for my schedule, but one of these days I'm going to get to one of those games, game days, and play with them. We also, last year, we had an online Christmas party or holiday party for the company. And this past year, in different regions, people have started getting together a little bit here and there at times when it's been easier. So we've had some regional get-togethers where people are, just getting together and being social. I've been recommended to do meditation. I haven't done that one recently either. You guys can answer that one too, David and Arthur.
I know I've got kids, so it's
Yeah.
chaos.
Yeah, we recommend people definitely take time and take time for rest, take time for play. And that's, I think, what's important. We're checking in with folks on a regular basis and making sure that we don't always have everything scheduled over holidays that are important to folks or things like that. So that's one of the reasons why this year we're not going to be doing a lot of releases in the middle of end of December and beginning of January, and we're going to come back strong in the early January. We're going to be finishing up a few things right now internally between now and the end of the year, and make sure people feel that they have time to relax and recover and come back strong.
Yeah, and just speaking personally for myself, it's one of the reasons I live in a camper, is that I do tend to be very focused on work, a little hyper focused on it, and being in a camper at least kind of also keeps me moving in the world and connected to the world, and that's one of my approaches to trying to have some kind of balance.
I think and maybe adding my little piece here. Um, there is a part of this, and I think the person asking the question probably senses or has touched onto it, whether it's some people in the organization, whether it's people in the community. But there's a part of also this world of I guess it's a little bit beyond work for many people, in that there's a dedication and commitment to bringing these kind of things into the world. And as I was talking about earlier, it's like when I play with wear, and suddenly I feel something different, and I have a new experience, and then I have a new connection with somebody, and that's everyone. I think everyone who experiences this calling to not just make Holochain real, but see a shift in technology and how we interact with it, and also see a shift in how we organize and work together in communities and societies. I think has a bit of an element of it's draining and also it's regenerating at the same time. So yeah, it's an interesting one for me. But a great question. Okay, well, we're completely on the hour. Mary or Art, anything else that you want to share before I close off?
I just want to say thanks again to everybody who's been participating. I mean, the last several months have brought a lot of people in to play on the network, to do testing on the network, to work, you know, to get onto Elemental Chat, to get into the HoloFuel test. And there's just going to be more and more of that. And I just am super grateful for everybody who's just excited to get on board with it and participate. And again, also all those people who are sharing details, writing applications, doing explainers. There's just so much content that's been being developed out there in the ecosystem and in the community. And I'm super grateful for all of that because it helps a lot of the folks who are just finding out about us and coming in. And every application that people start talking about and start writing is the beginning of something new. So really appreciate all the app devs who are learning and going to dev camp and all of that as well. So just that's what I'm present to. Thanks.
Yeah. Super. All right. Any final word from you? Otherwise, I'll. Okay. I'll take note. All right. Well, actually, there's one big piece I forgot to mention halfway through. It's just the context of in one of the themes today. I completely forgot to mention how important the green theme is, and having efficient blockchain, etc., and sustainability, etc., and especially as the wave of creativity starts to come, what also comes is a new form of expectation, because what we're looking for in this kind of ecosystem isn't only about financial transactions. Not that it only was before, but there was a sort of a period around the sort of the big DeFi boom where it became much more about that. And so I think that's actually a really remarkable, lovely shift. And also the story of when Holo truly comes online and start to be able to provide hosting in this way, I think is just going to be a phenomenal Holo specific story. So very excited about that. Art, sorry, I cut you off just in case you had any final words, but otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching. 49th AMA, I'm looking forward to number 50. I assume we'll be early and we'll be in the new year. So very much looking for that. Thank you very much, Mary, Art, everyone in the community, the guys in Dev Camp, all of the great questions, everybody building, and yeah, looking forward to a really amazing 2022. And just again, a huge shout out into the volume and the breadth and everything that's been built and all of the technical and non-technical contributions. It's really amazing to watch it unfold and kind of in awe of how much has been created. And yeah, can't wait for next year. That was my slightly indirect close, by the way.